been a while, but back once again at the Amherst kitchen table of our favorite astronomer, Hampshire College, and the 5 colleges' own Mr. Universe, Dr. Salman Hameed. There's so much to talk about in our atmosphere and in outer space, but we're going to talk a little bit about our very close atmosphere, UMass, where you have been associated, and with Smith College and the other colleges in the area, but where you and your family were when the arrests were happening during the protest last week.
Yeah, I mean, well, welcome back, Monty.
Thank you.
It's one of those things. I mean, we talk about usually lighter stuff, and we make fun of the universe because, yeah, I mean, why not?
Why not?
It should be made fun of.
I won't take it personally.
But this is really, I mean, it saddens me to talk about one of the leading institutions in the area, in our state, the flagship university, of what happened last week. And as you mentioned, I was there with my 10-year-old son, by the way. We were there. It was a peaceful protest, meaning to say, actually, they were very well organized. It was actually really amazing how well organized they were. It was not blocking anybody's view or walking out to classes or anything. Actually, it was on the side. If you know UMass campus, it's a little bit next to the pond on the backside. It
kind of like behind the big library.
It wasn't that big. And this is following up on a few months ago when 57 UMass students were arrested for just being sitting into one building protesting about that, and they were arrested, and there were disciplinary actions brought on by UMass, not by the state. State actually or dropped the charges, if I remember correctly, state or town, but UMass has still not dropped charges for those 57 students that got arrested, and some of them actually cost them a lot too, because they were going abroad, and that was the whole thing. And that had been going on. And we have a new chancellor at UMass. Now, when this newer protest was taking place, so there was an encampment, students were there, and how do you react to that? And to me, this is not, I mean, what we are going to talk about, if we were in Florida, in Texas, you go like, oh, those people over there, like, you know, it's the right wing or it's these conservatives. We are talking about here in Massachusetts. And we're not even talking about New York. I mean, like, you know, in that context, what happened. But in Massachusetts, where there is a history of protest also, and UMass itself, Daniel Ellsberg's papers, by the way, are housed here at UMass because of the philosophy and what kind of things, values that in some sense UMass stands for. Now you go like, well, it's about what is law, right? Well, in that context, well, Daniel Ellsberg was wrong in that context, but we know he was not, right? And that's the reason his papers are at UMass. So putting all of those things together for the chancellor, who is new, and for the chancellor who already had experience for those arresting those 57 students whose charges had not been dropped, and for a chancellor who could see other examples. You can go the Dartmouth route, the Columbia route, or you can go the Northwestern route or Brown route, where you can actually have conversation. You can actually diffuse the situation.
Even the Smith route.
Even the Smith route. That's exactly right from our local context. But
which ended in conversation as opposed to arrest.
And then it diffuses. I mean, that's what it is. These are ideal. I mean, so I'm going to come back to one other minute about that, but I want to read what the president of Northwestern said, and then contrast that what the chancellor of UMass did. This is the president of Northwestern who said that this resolution, fragile though it may be, was possible because we chose to see our students not as a mob, but as young people who were in the process of learning. It was possible because we tried respectful dialogue rather than force. How hard it is to say that. Mm-hmm. How hard it is to understand that. Like, you know, not to treat your students as a mob. And so it really pains me that we are talking about UMass like that. And it could have been easily diffused. And if I can say one other thing, I was trying to, a lot of people are like, well, why are young people, I mean, there are two types of reactions going on. One is, like, that, oh, this is not really about Gaza. This is not really about other things. It's because, for example, they don't have anything to do. Or it's because, there are all these psychological explanations that are coming in. But on the other hand, as other people have also pointed out, that young people historically almost always have turned out to be correct. If you look at, again, I wasn't there, but for the Vietnam protests, the civil rights, or an apartheid protest, and even climate change, by the way, it's the young people who are leading it. And I was wondering why that is the case. And one of the things from the science perspective, when we talk about when you are 8 or 9 or 10, you have this innate curiosity. And as a scientist, or as people, when we try to keep people interested in science, we say, can we bottle that up? Why do we lose that fundamental curiosity when you're 8, 9, or 10? You just want to learn. You have so many questions. You want to learn about the world, the universe, but you lose it. I guess it's a similar type of thing that when you are in college, you have been exposed. You actually are reading books. You have been exposed to deeper thinking about these topics. And you have this view that is idealistic because you think you can change the world. Before you get jaded, just like you lose curiosity when you grow a little bit older, when you become teenager and beyond. But for these type of actions, perhaps it has to do with that you lose this idealism, but you have it. You want to bottle that up because they fundamentally believe, they are willing to get arrested for things they believe that are not directly impacting their lives. I think that context, they are brave enough and they want to learn more about it. Now, for a university, and I should say for a university chancellor, that should be something just like from curiosity. You go like, that, even if I disagree with, that is amazing. It would be something like if somebody keeps on asking questions as a 9 or 10-year-old and you get really annoyed by it, like, no, stop asking questions. Why is the sky blue? I told you it is just blue, okay? And you keep on asking questions and you can get annoyed by that. It is like this here. No, do not get annoyed. This is what is wonderful. This is in a more unadulterated form, sort of like this amazing innate curiosity and innate idealism that humans have, and we should nurture it rather than call the cops.
Hampshire College astronomer Dr. Salman Hameed, who was at those protests last Tuesday. We are talking about idealism and innate curiosity and young people being idealistic in their curiosity. We have Nyla Morera on the show today talking about a fiction piece, but inspiring young naturalists to go out into the world and look. And we, as citizens of the Northeast, had an incredible citizen science opportunity over the weekend when the Northern Lights appeared in our skies. Now, I failed miserably at observing this. Salman Hameed texts me while I'm at the Shea at a sold-out concert of Ricky Lee Jones. I leave, go outside, look to the northwest as instructed in my text messages. I don't see anything. Show's over. I get in my car. I drive to Gill, where the skies are darker. Look all over the place. I see nothing. Now, one of the text messages on the thread said, from Salman, said, use phone. And I thought it was like a voice-to-text error. Like you were trying to text me voice-to-text. It wasn't until the next day when I woke up and saw everybody, including my own son, had incredible pictures of this, that I should have been using my phone to see the Northern Lights as opposed to my own eyes. These beautiful pictures you have, this is not how you observe them in your driveway from Amherst on Saturday night.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, as much as, with my age, I'm becoming more of I would love to be more of a Luddite. I'm like, I don't want to use technology. Right. But in this case, phone was actually useful for two reasons. One, of course, I had mentioned to a bunch of people, if you see something, text me so that I can go out, right? And Smith College astronomer James Lowenthal, he was going out. He says, I'm going to go out and drive up, in the dark space. Actually, he actually invited me to, do you want to come? I was like, with a 10-year-old, I was like, I don't think so. I think I'll stay here. So, but I was like, if you see something, text me. And he did. And I went out. And I texted a bunch of people, including you,
Yeah.
for example. I was like, no, just go out. And I went into the driveway, and my wife was with me, Leila, and we were out there. And it's like, and now, as an astronomer, we look up at the sky a lot. I mean, I look up at the sky every night because, of course, what if there is a supernova?
What if Betelgeuse goes supernova? I think about that almost every night.
Or even if not Betelgeuse, something else, or there are UFOs or something like that. I just want to, I don't want to miss out on something just because I didn't look up.
Yeah.
So I'm taking the trash out. Well, I'm looking up because I can understand out there. So we do give a little bit of a sense of what the sky ought to look like. So when we were out there were clouds also, which was not helping. But then there were other things that I was like, this looks like it's not a cloud. And my wife and neighbors also had come out because I've texted them. We were all out there. Like, I don't know. So we are just going through this conversation. So a friend of mine, he actually texted and he sent me this picture. And he goes like, look at this. And he also said, try the iPhone. And I was like, okay. And I just switch on. It's not even taking the pictures because pictures, iPhone, when it was taking the pictures of the sky, there was a 3-second exposure. Even without that, you just look through the window, basically. You just look through the screen, and it was bathed in red. And that was amazing. And then we actually started seeing a little bit later a full glow of red that you could see. It looked like a sunset time. And I had to remind, people were like, looks like a glow at the sunset. But remember, it's 11 o'clock at night.
Right.
There is no sunset. Every shade of red that you are seeing, and that is actual aurora.
So, scientifically, for people who don't understand what causes aurora borealis, can I try to guess?
Yes.
Okay, sun flare or something of that nature, a coronal mass ejection, right?
Yeah, it's a big storm that happens, and it throws in a lot of particles. Now, remember, constantly the sun has particles that are going in. That's called solar wind. And so those are going in, and that's the reason why when people have northern lights or aurora borealis on their bucket list, they go to the northern areas, like Iceland or other places or far up in the Arctic Circle, and you can actually see them because those particles are still coming in through the north and south pole. It's just not northern lights. It's
because of the magnetic fields, right? Easier to get in there. When there's a big storm, we can see it more southerly because it excites the electrons in our environment, in our atmosphere. Is that right?
So that's what's happening all the time. That's what produces the color. But when there is a big solar storm, as it was expected, so sun goes through a cycle of storms every 11 years, or you can also think about roughly around 22 years. And that's when there is a lot more activity and a lot more ejections of these type of particles. These are electrons, protons, charged particles basically that come in. And when they come into our atmosphere, they interact with oxygen and nitrogen, which are the constituents in our atmosphere. And when they excite oxygen atoms, for example, it depends upon the electrons within oxygen atoms, then they fall back down to their state where they should be. And when they fall back down, they emit light. And where they are falling down, this is where sort of like all atoms have, and molecules too, but all atoms have signature wavelengths or signature light that they emit when electrons jump in. That's how we know what the universe is made up of, what the sun is made up of, what the stars are made up of, because we can identify from the color with these electrons jumping down what colors they would emit. It would be dependent on that. So in this particular case, for example, you can see green, and that is when you have these a particular height, so about 60 to 190 miles. Oxygen that is there, when it gets excited, you see mostly the green ones. And the green color is actually more common. That's the one that you see in northern lights. Oftentimes, if you have seen pictures of those, you will see the greenish color. But when there is a bigger storm, solar storm, and so there are a lot more particles coming out, it actually starts exciting oxygen atoms way high up in the atmosphere also, almost 200 miles and above. And that is what produces red color, because it's a different jumping down of these electrons, and oxygen is not as dense up there. So you actually see those reddish colors. Now, here is a cool thing. People who are way away from the poles, like we are, we actually see mostly reddish colors, although we saw green too, but reddish colors are more prominent because it's high up in the atmosphere, so we can actually see farther away. We are far away from the poles. That's why you have these different colors, and in rarer instances, you also see blue and purple, and sometimes yellow and pink also. That's a combination of these colors that you see. So all of those things, these are amazing things, and again, that can happen. Nothing to do with sunset, but it has to do with particles, electrons, protons coming into our atmosphere and exciting oxygen and nitrogen.
Why did we have to use our phones to see it?
Because Steve Jobs had a contract with the universe. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's interesting. So because I did not expect that either, and that's because the cameras are a bit more sensitive than our eyes, and red color in general, our eyes are more sensitive towards greener colors, right? But what our cameras are doing now with these things, they are more sensitive than your eye to detect those, and so that's why you were seeing it better on those cameras, and especially when you take a picture, because there was also a couple of 2 or 3 second exposures. Our eyes do not have that exposure time. Oh, I would love to have that exposure time in our eye where you can say, okay, don't process it. I'm just collecting colors. Like, that would be really cool. You can see the Orion Nebula, for example, like that with all the colors, but we don't. And so, but in general, that just tells you about the sensitivity of the camera. That raises a really interesting question, which kept on coming up. So my wife, she's an anthropologist, and so she was like, I mean, she loved it. It was amazing. We could still see it. But of course, our phones could capture it a lot more. And her question was, but this is not what I'm experiencing.
Right.
So,
which is why I don't feel bad that I didn't experience it, because you told me about it, and I saw your pictures, which is all I would have seen anyway if I had only experienced it with my own phone and my own pictures.
Okay, no. You should feel bad about it because you still see stuff, like, and you are still bathed. I mean, not bathed is a wrong word. I mean, we're not in there, but you can actually see all around you that light. So you do see that, but you have a much more enhanced version of it on your camera, for example, on your phone. And I think partly that's true, but I guess because as astronomers, for example, we are just used to you make a jump from what you are seeing to imagining what it really is. And because through the telescopes, you can actually see a lot more.
Yeah, we're not seeing anything from the James Webb telescope. James Webb's telescope is interpreting non-visible light so that we can understand it. So as beautiful as those pictures are, also fake, kind of.
Okay, all right. Well, yes, there is an interpretation to it. But I was going to give you a much more on the ground observation, not the sky. Right. And that is, if you look through the telescope and see Saturn, like, through a small telescope, you go for viewing, and you don't see Saturn as it is from the Cassini spacecraft. And yet when you see Saturn, it looks relatively small, but you see rings to it. But I think the joy of seeing Saturn from the telescope is that, whoa, if you look without that even small telescope, you look up, it looks like a dot. You look down, and it has a little hat on, or a little sort of like, sombrero on, or like, rings on. But I think, or at least that works for me, the joy is imagining that little Saturn with the rings that you are seeing through a small telescope. But we also have seen Saturn close by, imagining what this little thing is in reality, right? And I think that translation to a certain degree, I mean, I don't know, maybe that is not what people are used to, or some people are not used to it, but for me, that was the same way when I was looking up and I could see these wispy structures, not with like these glowing colors, but a hint of reddishness, which was weird because it was 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
There's a hint of reddishness and they're all around us. For me, that was incredible because I could decipher what that is through the phone and take a picture of that, because I'm like, that is what it really is. So in the same way, if you can think about small Saturn in the telescope and imagining it, what its sort of like really amazing Saturn is.
One more quick story. Your homeland, Pakistan, has been involved in a space mission for one of the first times ever.
That is correct. Well, not the space mission, to the moon. But yes, so Chinese Chang'e 6 mission, which we should talk about because it's a really cool mission. It's going to get samples from the far side of the moon. China brought about 4 pounds, I think, of rock from the near side for the first time since the Apollo missions that any moon material came back. And now they are planning on getting samples from the far side of the moon, which nobody has even landed other than China. And so they have a rover down there as well. And so it's a complex mission, but and we're going to talk about that in the coming weeks. But what this mission also contains, it has a couple of other instruments, one from, I think, Italy, one other from European Space Agency, and one from Pakistan. And it's an orbiter around the moon, so it is in orbit. And I mean, it was a student project. There was a competition, there were a bunch of countries that actually went in and competed for that. Pakistan was selected, and so in some sense, this is it's called iCube-Q, and Q is because one of the words for the moon is Qamar. It's also Chand, but it's also Qamar, and Qamar is the word for moon, and so iCube-Q. It's a cube satellite. These are smaller satellites, and it is orbiting around the moon, and it has sent its first pictures. But so that's, I mean, I think that's cool because, again, for the same reason, it's about inspiration. It's not, is it sort of like, the most cutting edge and all of that stuff? No, but it brings interest to the general public. And I think, and of course, there is competition with India too, which is not really a competition. India is way ahead in terms of space technology and in terms of the moon. But there was also, I think, a little bit of a pressure, like, hey, India landed the, spacecraft on the moon. What is Pakistan doing? So I think that geopolitics, which is the case within the U.S. and China as well, so and so forth, that plays a role. But I don't think it's really a competition because India is way ahead. Nevertheless, there is an orbiting satellite which was designed and made in Pakistan by students, and it is orbiting the moon. So I think, again, who knows? There will be young people looking at it and say, that's actually cool. We want to do that too. We want to get into science. We want to get into astronomy.
It just ties in so nicely with the idea that we don't want to stifle curiosity and creativity in young people. Let them learn and explore free from inhibition.
There is, and it's really, I miss that youngish part about that. It is just so pure. And you can even go down younger age when you have 1-year-old or 2-year-olds. I love that age because you can actually see that's what they are doing. They are constantly exploring the world. They are figuring it out. They're going to make sense. And I love the age of 8, 9, 10, 11 because that's when they are more sophisticated in ways they are getting interested in it. And same thing in the college age. You have this wonderful idealism, and then the older people come in, well, that you should not, thou shalt not question. And it oftentimes it becomes the question of, you should follow my authority. And I think that is just sad for university, for institutions of learning. That's where we should be. And there has been a lot of critique of universities that they've become more corporatized. And this is how it sort of in fact, at the end, if I can just tie that together, when people complain about it, one thing that I talk about is the corporatization of higher education. This is one result of that. And the other thing is when people talk about securitization of the society, when you can bring in cops, as people have known from Black Lives Matter protests as well, black movements, and not to mention the civil rights and all of those other ones, the only thing that happens once you bring in cops is something bad that happens. And when 65-year-old professors get roughed up, for example, what happened in Dartmouth and at other places as well, thrown to the ground because cops are trained to do one thing. And they're not thinking about, hey, look at these idealized students. And so I think it's just, I don't know what healing would look like for UMass from now. But as I've read the statement from the Northwestern president, I just hope it can be done. All you have to do is to recognize that what the idealism of students look like. Don't stifle it. And you can have disagreements. I'm not saying this is not about which side is right or wrong. I'm just saying what they are arguing for is an idealistic way of looking at the world, and we should cherish it, not stifle it.